Look at that, the amazing human body. The head, the ear, the neck, the shoulder. The arm, the elbow, the wrist, the finger, the knee, the shin, the toe. Look at all the bones inside.
Oh yeah. Take off one layer. Take off two
There's all
layers.
the blood vessels. There's all the guts.
3 layers. Hey, where's the gut?
Those are the guts. Those are your guts.
When you eat your food, it goes down there. There's your stomach. There's your
Penis.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
And here it goes. That's the vagina.
Yes, that's it.
Sorry, it's a girl.
Oh, it's a girl, then it's not the penis. So,
And here's the penis.
Well, actually, yeah, that's actually an anus.
Oh, guys, the anus.
yeah, and there's her muscles. There's all her muscles.
These are all your guts. This is where your
Er zijn weinig wetenschappers
food goes.
die zo vreemd en tegelijk zo aanstekelijk kunnen verhalen over heel het raadsel dat ons omringt
Let's read about it.
en waarvan wij zelf de uitdrukking zijn, ook al weten we niet wat we uitdrukken. Er zijn weinig wetenschappers die daarover zo aanstekelijk, absurd en met een prettig gevoel voor humor kunnen vertellen als Freeman Dyson. Toen ik Dyson uitnodigde, wist ik niet beter of daarover zou het gaan. De schoonheid en troost van het universum. De schittering van de wetenschap.
Right. Like little
Important
comments.
books to read about bodies.
Good. The most exciting thing is, in a way, gamma ray bursts, because that is still a total mystery. These are the most violent events in the whole universe, so they are not particularly consoling. They are just mysterious. These are monstrously energetic, monstrously fast. Something like a whole...
Rotating.
No, simply the speed at which the energy is dispersed into the universe. Within a fraction of a second, so more energy is released than the sun puts out in its whole life. So nobody knows where they are or what they are or how they are or why they are. So that's exciting. It keeps us all... It's not so much beautiful, because we don't know enough yet to say whether it's beautiful. We don't... But it's beautiful that the universe still has so many secrets.
Dit soort verhalen verwachtte ik. De zonsverduistering die hij zag in North Carolina, zo'n kwart eeuw geleden, ook daarover zouden we praten. Schoonheid en troost, nietwaar?
Well, it is the most majestic spectacle that there is. I think there's nothing greater than that, as far as I know, that nature has to offer. It's this extraordinary reversal of nature, when in the middle of a bright summer day, suddenly it grows dark and the birds stop flying around, the animals are all quiet, and it gets darker and darker, and then suddenly there you see it, this silvery ring around the black moon, and you see the stars, at least a few of the stars coming in the dark sky. You see, at least we saw several planets, and then in 5 minutes it's over and life continues. But that's something you don't forget.
A kind of sheer beauty.
Yes, and the strangeness of it. It is as if the normal processes of nature suddenly were interrupted.
We zouden elkaar ontmoeten in Princeton, op het terrein van het Institute for Advanced Study, waar hij al zo'n 30 jaar woont en werkt. Heilige grond. Hier zijn natuurwetten uitgedacht. Hier vonden de besprekingen plaats over de eerste atoombom. Einstein woonde er. Oppenheimer. Zo ongeveer alles wat de afgelopen eeuw heeft voortgebracht aan natuur, schei en wiskundigen verbleef hier ooit. Ik dacht vooraf, ook daarover zal het deels gaan. Over de genieën waarmee Dyson samenwerkte en over de intrigerende verschijningen waarmee hij nu omgaat.
I think of Stephen Hawking, who is one of my heroes. And of course, I mean, it's the most marvelous thing that we have been friends of Stephen Hawking for 30 years. And now suddenly the world has discovered him, and he's suddenly become an international figure, and he deserves it so much. I'm just so delighted. He's totally imprisoned. He cannot speak, he cannot move his legs and arms, he can move just 2 fingers. That's all the communication he has with the outside world. Just with 2 fingers he can do everything that he does. And as a result of that, he thinks deeply, and he has probably become a much greater scientist than he would have been otherwise. And that's what he says himself, that in many ways it's an advantage to be isolated the way he is isolated. Quite an amazing character.
Dit soort verhalen zouden in het verschiet liggen. Zoals ik me had voorbereid op een lang gesprek over het fenomeen schoonheid. Had hij maar niet al geschreven: we weten van alles over de schoonheid van de wetenschap, maar we weten niets van de wetenschap van de schoonheid. Ik wist niet beter of daarover zou het vooral gaan. Hij zou de pracht van verre melkwegstelsels beschrijven en hier op aarde de schoonheid van de bergen, waar hij zo van houdt. Het leek volmaakt vanzelfsprekend.
Beauty.
It's something you feel, you can't explain.
But what you're saying that if I come up with a series of Beauty and Consolation, you say you don't know what you're talking about.
Precisely, yes. As far as any scientific understanding goes. I mean, we know what we're talking about because we can feel it ourselves, but we cannot explain it.
You don't have the slightest idea why we, this species, experience beauty. And why beauty in itself can be considered also.
No, I think what is known about the structure of our brains is very little. I mean, but we do know that the limbic system is older than the cortex.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and roughly speaking, the limbic system is concerned with emotions, and the cortex is concerned with images and thoughts. So it implies somehow that emotions are older than intelligence. So and that probably does mean something. It probably means that the emotions were absolutely essential for living before intelligence arose. And so what we could not be intelligent without the emotions, I think, is very likely. At least not the way we are built.
No, where does beauty fit in?
Well, that we don't know, except that it seems very likely that in some sense the feeling of beauty was older than the understanding of what arouses it.
Would you say that we know more about the universe than we know about our sense of beauty and why it exists?
Yes, certainly that's true. We know a huge amount about the universe. We know zero about how the sense of beauty functions. We don't know anything.
Not even where it's...
We don't know where it's located in the brain. We don't know how it's switched on or off. We know essentially zero. Even psychologists on the level of just description know very little about it.
That's strange, isn't it? It's a kind
Yes,
of...
it implies that it is somehow a very basic function of the organism which comes even before language. It's so basic that we have no words really to express it.
Eerst waren er de emoties. Ver daarna kwamen de woorden en het besef. De woorden zijn nog veel te jong om de emoties te kunnen verklaren. Aha, dit soort bespiegelingen. Dat was wat ik in gedachten had. Het hele fenomeen schoonheid nou eens van een andere kant bekeken. Niets weten we ervan. We weten niet eens of we de enige diersoort zijn die schoonheid kan ervaren. Of dat andere soorten het ook doen, en misschien wel beter. Ik wist dat Dyson van vogels houdt. Ook daarover zou het dus even gaan. Alles leek duidelijk van tevoren.
Do animals have fun, or do animals experience beauty? What do you think?
Yes, we cannot possibly know, and I mean, of course this has always been a riddle. I remember, this lovely line of Blake, how do we know but that every bird flies through the air is not a huge world of delight, closed to our senses five. And I think somehow you have the impression birds do have it. Just when you see them flying around in the flocks. I saw them the other day here. A huge flock of starlings flying around in wonderful ballet movements. Thousands of birds all flying together. And you had the feeling they must be doing this somehow from a feeling of beauty. Cannot imagine that it had any particularly practical purpose.
Do you have the idea that we are getting more and more sensitive concerning beauty in the course of evolution?
That we don't know.
No.
Possibly the chimpanzee may be more sensitive than we are. We don't know. I spent a wonderful week up in the Northern Islands last summer with my son George, chasing whales. And there's an expert on whales, I would say a whale worshipper, up there in Canada called Paul Spong, who maintains a kind of whale watching station that's on an island which he owns. And he has large numbers of hydrophones in the water.
Mm-hmm.
So you can hear the whales' conversation. And there are about 100 whales which reside nearby. They are essentially permanent residents there. And he knows each one individually. They are all identified and he can recognize their voices. And he's been listening to their conversations for about 30 years. He hasn't the faintest idea what they're talking about.
But they are talking.
They're talking, no doubt, and all day long they're talking. But nobody has come close to understanding the language. He's probably the one who has studied them the most. And he quite freely says that I understand nothing. Mm-hmm. All he can do is just record what they say, but hope that one day we shall understand it.
Misschien had ik Dyson juist hierom uitgenodigd. Hij is een wetenschapper die niet hoog van de toren blaast over wat we allemaal weten. Hij is juist gefascineerd door wat we niet begrijpen. Daarover zouden we het hebben. Nederigheid.
The universe doesn't necessarily follow our preferences about what it should consider beautiful. Particularly that's true of the particles. In many ways, the particle physics has grown uglier and uglier the deeper it gets. And that's the way nature is.
What you're saying is we want to find a world of particles that is ordered, elegant, aesthetic, explains the beginning of the universe and the end of it. And what we are finding is a kind of rainwood of misunderstandings.
Well, no, we find simply that our prejudices aren't shared by nature. But I mean, you have to blame the experimenters for that, really. I mean, the theories always try to be beautiful, and then the
and there comes a guy.
experiments
Yeah.
spoil it by showing nature is not that way. So again and again, nature turns out to be less elegant or less symmetrical than we thought.
But we want the world to be symmetrical, ordered, beautiful.
Some of us do. And
Yeah.
I'm sort of on the side of nature myself. And what I would hope is that there will always be loose ends that we cannot tie down, trickier than we can understand.
Mm-hmm.
I would find that much more exciting than having a final theory. I would hope that in a certain way that nature is inexhaustible, and that's certainly consistent with everything we've seen so far. The further we go, the more complicated it gets. So that, although it's true that the theories in themselves are very beautiful, but so nature always has the last laugh.
And during your career, nature was laughing.
Yes.
Time and again.
Yes.
En daarna zouden we uitgebreid verder praten over de natuurwetten. Waarom ze zo vaak juist niet aan ons verlangen naar schoonheid en ordening voldoen. Om af en toe lukraak wat zijpaden in te slaan. Bijvoorbeeld naar Dysons vader, de componist. Dyson zal geduldig naar de muziek van zijn vader luisteren, terwijl hij intussen wil dat deze film over iets heel anders gaat. Hij beseft allang dat we zo meteen overnieuw moeten beginnen.
Oh, there it goes.
Wow.
A merchant was there with a forked beard. The Merchant is one of the favorite pieces, and each of these characters can be seen all around us. I mean, we haven't changed in 500 years.
No.
And of course, Chaucer had a tremendous sense of humor.
En tenslotte zouden we het over God hebben. Het eind van de film stond vast nog voor er een meter film verschoten was. Goddank had Dyson die andere film in gedachten. Een film die ook met God zal eindigen, maar op een geheel andere manier. Over een klein uur zal hij met zijn versie van het scheppingsverhaal aankomen. Maar nog enkele minuten praten we over religie in de verkeerde film, zogezegd.
The question, what is the purpose in the universe, if there is one, and is quite disconnected with knowing the laws of physics. So I always say there are two windows to look out on the universe. One is science and the other is religion. But you can't look out through both windows at the same time.
Well, you're looking out of the window of science. What do you see?
Well, then you see all this marvelous construction with a very, very beautifully balanced processes going on, which we're gradually learning to understand. And I mean, it's an exceedingly beautiful landscape. We can admire it and we can enjoy it, but it has nothing to do with meaning and purpose. Then you look through a religious window and you see the same universe as having some purpose and having some beauty of a different kind, which again we don't understand, but we can still feel it. But the tools are completely different. And the tools of science are mostly instruments and mathematics. And the tools of religion are words and music and companionship and so that they both, to me, they both have a sort of equal claim to be real.
Really?
Yes. But one shouldn't mix them up.
Goed. Tot zover de film, die wel gedraaid werd, maar die er feitelijk niet toe doet. Hij weerspiegelt fragmentarisch waar ik het over had willen hebben. Maar Dyson, die had me van tevoren meegedeeld. Als je hier naar Princeton komt, mag je alles aansnijden. Ik zal je niet in de weg zitten. Maar als je het over schoonheid en troost wilt hebben, staat er wat mij aangaat slechts 1 punt op de agenda. Kinderen en kleinkinderen. Ik schreef terug: erg vind ik het niet, maar wel vreemd. Straks loop ik daar rond in Princeton met een van de meest eminente natuurkundigen van de laatste eeuw. En die heeft het dan niet over de heilige grond waarop we ons bevinden, niet over de Andromeda-nevel of de schoonheid van Einsteins vergelijkingen. Nee, je wilde het dus hebben over je familie. Enfin, het is jouw keus. Ik kom. PS, als het dan toch over het familieleven gaat, kun je dan zorgen dat er wat kinderen en kleinkinderen komen binnenvallen tijdens ons onderhoud? Dyson antwoordde per omgaan. Hij zond een verhaal van 9 kantjes, getiteld Van de schoonheid en de troost, over kinderen en kleinkinderen. Daarbij de mededeling: immer zal er zijn 2 dochters komen langs en tenminste 3 kleinkinderen.
Read about bones? Skeleton. That's what the skeleton is. That's all the bones together. There are 206 bones inside your body.
206.
Yes, 206.
Oh, well, what's this?
And that's what you'd look like if you didn't have any bones.
Wow.
You'd just be a bag of jelly. A heap of wobbly jelly. That would, if you didn't have bones to hold you up.
We would see a bag of jelly.
That's how
Yep.
green slime, yes. There are 206 bones inside your body
Grandpa to help you with that, please.
in all shapes and sizes. They join together to make a skeleton. Your skull is like a crash helmet. Checks your brain. The top of your arm bone
Okay, you guys are degenerating.
fits into a hollow. Yes.
Stuck in here.
It does.
I really do. It's a book smelling stunk.
Freeman Dyson, de natuurkundige, zal hier in zijn woonkamer in Princeton het verhaal voorlezen dat hij schreef over schoonheid en troost, getiteld Over kinderen en kleinkinderen. Hier zullen zijn vrouw Imme, 1 van zijn dochters en 3 van zijn kleinkinderen aanschuiven, die hij ook nog eens zal voorlezen uit Oude Schildpad. En tussen de bedrijven door praten we soms even samen.
Our 5-year-old grandson Randall is swinging on a swing in the playground. He is thinking, and we don't disturb his thoughts. After a while, he announces his verdict. I think I would rather be an egg than a chicken. Just at that moment, a large fire truck approaches and the fire crew attaches it to a hydrant. This is a novice crew with an instructor teaching them how to handle the equipment. They are not yet ready to tackle a real fire. Quickly they roll out the fire hoses and begin squirting water into the neighboring woods. Randall and his brothers rush to join the action. The opportunity to pursue further the philosophy of eggs and chickens is lost. A year earlier, Randall is silent in the back of the car, while my wife and I are sitting in front. The grown-ups are talking about trivialities, about the groceries we're on our way to buy, and the probability of finding a convenient parking place. When there's a pause in our chatter, we hear the voice of the philosopher in the back of the car. He says, with a tone of triumph, "God is dead." We ask him what led to this conclusion, And he has a logical answer prepared. Well, we become spirits when we're dead, and God is a spirit, so God must be dead. Then we arrive at the grocery store, and trivial pursuits distract our attention. We don't have time to explore the implications of God's death. Only one thing is clear to us. Randall thought of this by himself. He has not been reading Nietzsche. It is likely that his thought was guided not so much by the logical argument as by resentment against God's intrusiveness. He knows that he has a good side and a bad side, and that in spite of good intentions, the bad side often prevails. He resents the fact that God spies on him all the time. God is invading his privacy, and he needs to keep his thoughts private. It's hard enough to be the oldest of 3 brothers without having to deal with God in addition. With a sense of relief and liberation, he declares God dead and regains his privacy.
Freeman, how do they differ, the 3 of them? What kind of personalities are they?
Yeah, well, of course, Randall, I know Randall much better. And we play chess. Randall can play chess with me, and checkers. And the others, of course, I never get them one at a time, or almost very rarely. You can't do so much. Whoops, that's the telephone. That's all right.
Would anybody like to have Grandpa read a book to you? Would you enjoy? Shall I go out?
Well, what about the old turtle? Is that any good?
Oh, I know where it is. Oh, we love the old turtle.
Good. Sometime earlier, Randall is sitting in the bathtub in our home. The bathtub's a good place for thinking. After a silence, he asks, "Does the devil have a brother?" My wife replies, "No, I don't believe so." Randall is quiet for a while. Then he says, "That would be double trouble for the world." Once, long, long ago, and yet somehow not so very long, when all the animals and rocks, look at the pictures are beautiful in this book. There's the animals and the rocks. When all the animals and rocks, and winds and waters, and trees and birds,
And fish.
good, so you can read too, that's good, you can help read, could speak and understand one another, there began an argument. It began softly at first, quiet as the first breeze that whispered, "He is a wind who is never still." Quiet as the stone that answered, "He is a great rock that never moves." Gentle as the mountain that rumbled, "God is a snowy peak high above the clouds."
If I talk about beauty and consolation in your childhood or early childhood, even if the memories aren't true, we don't care about that anymore after 50.
Yeah, well, let's begin with the total solar eclipse in 1927. That's something I do remember. I was furious at my father because he wouldn't take us to see it. And that was when I was 3.5. And it's probably my first really clear memory of this anger against my father. We had the eclipse in Winchester, which is in the south of England, so we could see the 3/4 eclipse sun, which of course was exciting. But we knew that if we had only gone 200 miles to the north, to Yorkshire, we could have seen it total. And my father didn't think it was worth the trouble to drive 200 miles.
But you were 3.5 years
I was
old,
3.5, yes.
realizing what an eclipse was.
Oh, of course we knew what it was. We saw it, of course, and only it wasn't total, and that was his fault. That we weren't taken to Yorkshire, where we could have seen it total. So at that point, I asked my father, "When is the next one in England?" And he told me August the 9th, 1999. And I said, "I'm going to see the next one." And so after 72 years, maybe I really will see it. It's now 2 years from now. There will be the next total eclipse in England.
Yeah.
So that's something I've always been staying alive. I wanted to live long enough at least to see the next one.
This is Beauty and Consolation, the eclipse in 99?
perhaps we will see. I mean, in the meantime, I have seen one which was also marvelous. That was about 20 years ago when our daughters were small, and we took 4 of our kids, and we all drove down to, that was North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And there we saw a magnificent total, the real thing, the total eclipse.
I remember when we were one time, I don't know how old I was, not older than these guys, but you know, being woken up in the middle of the night and dragged outside, and we had to run down the hill and look at the comet going by, you know, in the middle of the night, and we were freezing. So yeah, I mean, and they took us all the way down to North Carolina to see the, you know, the solar eclipse.
Were you interested or not?
It was neat, yeah. It was of course spectacular, you know. And although we didn't, you know, at that age really appreciate it, but I mean, it was something really fantastic. I mean, I still remember. It must have been pretty. I remember the comet too, the little tiny comet.
Hello.
That was probably,
I think it was
Kurutek.
Yeah, we all had to rush down and see it.
Yes, it was very.
It was freezing in the middle of the night.
It was a punishment. I was there too.
Hello.
And you know, of course, the way that he thinks of it, we expected to see this huge comet go by, and it was this little tiny.
Well, he saw it huge. He thought it was huge.
To him, it is, and it is beautiful. Now I appreciate it. When this comet went by recently, I was, oh wow, that's so fascinating.
Uh-huh. Does he behave differently now he's a grandfather compared to how he behaved when you were growing up?
No, now he invites the grandchildren to come and look in his telescope, and we've looked at the moon here through the telescope. Right, Randy, you did with Grandpa, remember? Big telescope.
Telescope is mine.
Yes, it
You
really
have a
is
telescope.
yours.
Yeah, Grandpa got him a telescope.
It's mine and
It is true.
Grandpa's.
Yes, it's you're true. We should get to use it more. I'm so
It's
lazy.
mine and Grandpa's. It's mine and Grandpa's.
No, that is
Telescope.
certainly.
Look at it. Look at things together.
That is a deterioration. I used to take the telescope out much more when I was young.
Yes.
With children or?
Yes,
Yeah.
The children. Oh, yes.
yes, but that's just a matter of being tough. In those days, I didn't mind getting frozen.
Did you
I
look through the telescope with Granddad or not? Did
I
you look at the stars?
Did you? You guys did.
Yes.
Remember when we looked through?
What did you see?
I also like stars and stuff and the moon. And I have also something else to say. I think he likes to read.
That's right. Beauty and consolation are the gifts that children bring into the lives of parents and grandparents. People without children find other beauties and other consolations, but children are the most universal sources of beauty and consolation, available to educated and uneducated, to sophisticated and primitive, to rich and poor alike. Human beings of all cultures and races have this in common. Our biological heritage imposed on us an imperative to love and nurture and educate our children. Raising and educating children are the most important things that our evolution has designed us to do. To raise children is exhausting, to educate them is difficult. Evolution has given us the reward of joy to help us endure the pain of child rearing and the tedium of education. We would not fulfill our roles as guardians of the young if the young didn't fill our hearts with joy. It's no accident that we find their bodies beautiful and their minds miraculous. It's no accident that we find consolation for the sorrows of the world in watching their bodies grow and their minds unfold.
I got a note from Max on my fax machine. Would you imagine? And you know, I was very tired when I read it. I read it over and over, but you know what I think it said? I will show it to you later. I really think it said, I love you.
And I saw the answer you wrote.
Yes, but I will show it to you. Do you spell I love you? Listen, do you spell it Z?
No.
Do you? Well, that's the kind of stuff that arrived.
That was
I
written
think
by
his-
Max.
Max's little hand just went wham, wham, wham. Right? And sent a note to Omi. I thought it said I love you, just the way I love you.
Just don't stand in front of it. Just you can look at it from the side.
Look on the site.
You want to be where?
I don't remember my mother except with grey hair. She was already 43 when I was born. And so she was in a way more of a grandmother than a mother.
Mm-hmm.
But still, we were very close. And of course, we talked endlessly about science, about literature, about music, about everything. But it was on a rather intellectual level. They were not, neither of them were sort of the young parents who would play around with the kids. My father liked to play with us in moderation, but it was mostly more outdoor pursuits. I mean, I remember he made a toboggan that we could slide down on. So he was sometimes a companion. My mother never would do anything like that, as far as I remember. So they were rather more intellectual parents than physical parents. But certainly we were treated well, and they took a lot of trouble to educate us and to make sure that we got plenty of books to read. And so on an intellectual level,
everything was okay.
We had a very good childhood, yes, and we certainly were close. My mother was a lawyer and my father was a musician, and both of them had wide interests. So the books on the shelves were about science and other things besides just law and music.
Yeah, intellectually it was okay.
Very good.
Emotionally?
Yes. Emotionally, we had to go elsewhere. I mean, emotionally I was closer to my sister than to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
My sister is still very close. She's 3 years older than I am, so she, in a way, was my substitute mother.
What kind of a father was Freeman? We were talking about his parents, and he described them as a kind of, intellectual, kind, but cold.
Yes, this is what I believe very much. That is really what they were. I mean, deep in, they were very loving parents, but they did not express this. I mean, I never really saw them go up. I saw Freeman every once in a while taking his hand and sort of holding his mother's hand, and she was obviously enjoying that, but she didn't return it. She just held very still, and you could somehow feel something very satisfying going through her, her body. I think that's true. That's how they were. But I think in a way Freeman was a more outgoing father. I mean, there were many things he didn't do with them. I mean, he wouldn't go out and actually kick a ball around or really race around with them. Again, for him, life with the children is much more an intellectual adventure where, you love reading to them. You absolutely love to hear them talk and so on. But if they spill a little milk, it's a little, tougher.
Then what?
Well, I mean, it's, they know very well that Grandpa will really sort of make a very fierce face if the milk goes over the table and so on. Still, they love him very much.
And the fish in the ocean, look at the fish in the ocean, answered, God is a swimmer in the dark blue depths of the sea. I think they are sharks, perhaps. Big ones, I'm not sure. No, said the star, God is a twinkling and a shining far, far away. No, replied the ant. God is a sound and a smell and a feeling who is very, very close. God, insisted the antelope, is a runner swift and free who loves to leap and race with the wind. There's the antelope. They can run so fast. She is a great tree, murmured the willow, a part of the world, always growing and always giving. You are wrong, said the island. God is separate and apart. God is like the shining sun, far above all things, said the blue sky. No, he is a river who flows through the very heart of things, thundered the waterfall. There's the waterfall.
Did you miss that kind of caring from the part of your mother?
Not, I don't think much. I think she probably missed it more than I did, because I had her and she only had a kid brother.
Mm-hmm. Are you very different?
Yes.
Educating your own children.
Oh, you mean, am I different from my father? No, I think I'm rather similar. That's, of course, what is always very amusing. We get more and more like our parents as we get older. And,
Yeah.
and I notice my son is getting more and more like me. And
Oh, God. Yeah.
that's life. No, undoubtedly my children found me a bit cold. I don't feel cold, but...
Kind of intellectual.
Yes, certainly they have that. I mean, I've heard that explicitly from one or two of them.
Mm-hmm. Not the one of the Betty Buys, the stories.
Well, I love to read to them, and they would crawl into my bed in the morning sometimes. I mean, more in the morning than the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we could be very close, but not romping around. And
Like
How
we
was
did-
Freeman as a father? How would you describe him?
I'd have to say always supportive of what we did. You know, always there to, you know, we knew that what we did, he would be behind us and help us out and, you know, encouraging but not, guiding but not, you know, leading, I guess.
And as a person warm, caring, or more the intellectual cold part of the family?
Both. I think very warm and caring, but maybe not always visibly.
Is this an understatement, or?
No, but I mean, you always knew it. Even though it might not have been obvious to other people, but you always knew it. But I think other people could see it too.
it's a curious paradox that the beauty and consolation provided by children play such a large role in our lives and such a small role in our literature. The literature that we consider great is mostly concerned with dramatic events and extraordinary people. The growth of young children is, by contrast, ordinary. The intellectual awakening of young children is a process as ordinary as the physical awakening of woodland in springtime. Everyone loves the cute remarks of children, just as everyone loves the first flowers of spring. Flowers in spring also bring beauty and consolation, but no great literature is written about flowers. Such ordinary things as babies and flowers don't make themes for great books. Although the process by which a child begins to understand and to ask questions is a deep mystery, perhaps the deepest mystery of all that we see around us, we still consider babies ordinary because we're so familiar with them.
Oh yeah, you can pick it up. It's one of the children, I'm sure. Yeah.
Hello? Hi. Oh, pretty well. Are you finished with your piano lesson? More or less. Just walk in quietly, please. Don't make too much noise. Oh, good. All right. Well, knock at the door at the kitchen and I will know that you're there. Good. Sounds wonderful. I'll talk to you later because I'm... Okay? You were right. Mom,
One of the children.
this was one of my
Grandchildren.
daughters. One of my children.
Uh-huh.
There's one genre of literature in which great books about children can be written. This is the genre of books written for children to read. In a book for children, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The beauty of the ordinary can be honestly portrayed. The mystery of the ordinary is not hidden. Lewis Carroll was one of the greatest writers for children because he cared passionately for his child friend Alice, and he saw the world through her eyes. The world that he saw was absurd and full of paradox, because the world that every child sees is absurd and full of paradox. Randall's idea that he would rather be an egg than a chicken is a thought that might easily have occurred to Alice. Humpty Dumpty, the master of logical paradox, was an egg. Carroll understood what every child understands, that words are magic. He understood that eggs are also magic, their smooth, round shape hiding the mysteries that give birth to chickens and turtles and dinosaurs. He gave to Humpty Dumpty the insight that words mean whatever you want them to mean. Such an insight would not have occurred to a chicken.
What other bubbles did you make?
Small bubbles when you try to make a square one.
A square bubble?
No.
Oh, I'd
no,
love...
No, it's don't come in round.
They only come round? It didn't turn a square?
No.
Well, you know, people have tried to make square eggs, but they failed pretty much to a
Granddad
chicken.
did.
Simply, that's right. And chickens still lay round eggs. Right?
Somewhere.
They would like to make them square so they fit in the box better and they don't rattle around so much. But
Another great work of literature written for children is Charlotte's Web. This goes deeper than the Alice books. It deals directly with death. Charlotte dies. White wrote a masterpiece because he was not afraid to look at death through the mind of a child. At the end of tragedy comes consolation. After death comes birth. Charlotte never sees her babies, and her babies never know their mother, but life goes on. A child is able to accept death as a fact of life. Every child more than 3 years old is aware of death, and most children can speak of it in matter-of-fact words without fear. 2 years ago, our little poodle died, and Randall, sitting in his high chair at the supper table, remarked, "My bones are feeling heavier and heavier every day. I think I'll be going to heaven soon." Every child to whom we have read Charlotte's Web aloud has loved it. The story is sad, but it is also funny and joyful. Children know that life is like that, a mixture of sorrow and joy.
Well, grandchildren and children to me really are the salt of the earth. I have, without them, I don't know. I mean, my life would be very, very quiet and very uneventful. And these children keep you young. And in fact, they have in many ways also been our teachers, or my teacher, in letting me grow up and letting me understand the world and how to cope.
Yeah, the best upbringing comes not from one's parents, but from one's successors.
Absolutely, I think that's what I believe. That the children really are the teachers who help you in bringing them up, really, and making you understand how the world ticks.
"She is a hunter," roared the lion. God is gentle," chirped the robin. "He is powerful," growled the bear. And the argument grew louder and louder and louder, until, "Stop!" a new voice spoke. It rumbled loudly like thunder, and it whispered softly like butterfly sneezes. The voice seemed to come from... it seemed to come from Old Turtle. So there's Old Turtle. Old Turtle hardly ever said anything, and certainly never argued about God. But now Old Turtle began to speak. There he's speaking to the whole crowd. There are works also full of beauty and consolation written for adults about children. Richard Hughes was a master of this genre. His best-known story, A High Wind in Jamaica, deals with murder. Emily is a resourceful little girl who finds herself accidentally on board a pirate ship in the Caribbean. The pirates are friendly souls who treat her well and mean her no harm. The pirate captain gives her a bed in his own cabin. Then the captain of a Dutch merchantman is captured and put with Emily in the cabin. In a moment of panic, she murders the Dutchman. Arrived back in England, she easily pins the blame for the murder on the pirates. At the court of inquiry, the accused men have no chance of prevailing against her evident innocence. Insouciantly she walks free, while they are led away to be hanged. Emily shows us the dark side of childhood, the ruthlessness that nature gave us long ago to help us to survive the harsh struggle for existence, the cunning that hides ruthlessness behind an innocent face. Every child has a dark side, though not every child commits murder. Emily is true to her nature. She is lovable because it is in our nature as human beings to love children even when they do evil. Children must be ruthless, and parents must be forgiving. Otherwise, their genes will not survive. Another great book about children is William Golding's Lord of the Flies. Golding shows us an even darker side of childhood. The ruthlessness of a gang is worse than the ruthlessness of a single child. The gang is the natural result of competition for status and power, when children are left by themselves on an island without adults to restrain them. The children need strong leadership to survive in a tropical jungle, and the price of strong leadership is blind loyalty and terror. They are trapped between the silence of the jungle and the brutality of the gang. Children still obey the instincts of tribal cohesion that enabled a social animal to survive the hazards of famines and ice ages. Golding's children are as individuals no worse than Emily. They are worse only when they are submerged in the gang. Golding's book tells us deep truths about our children and about ourselves. Even when we do evil, we are not all bad. Golding's children, in the depths of their degradation, are lovable too. There is beauty and consolation in tragedy, not only in stories with happy endings.
These children grow on you so much. They are, and you know, when they pay you back and when they come and they slap their fat little hands on your shoulder and they tell you how much they love you or how much they need you, it's all worth it, you know, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So I think I would pine away if they weren't here. In fact, this little thing here isn't there, and I had him for...
It's grandchildren.
This is one of the grandchildren, yeah.
Max.
That's the last one. That's Max, who's in California, and mother decided to go back to work after 3 weeks, and there came the SOS. You have to come, mother. I don't have anybody for the child, you know.
And there you go.
Of course, I hopped on the plane, and then I had him all to myself all day long, and it was very nice. It was one child, you know. And it was absolutely wonderful. So
You're talking like Freeman's talking like a quite kind of happy family life.
oh, absolutely. I think
Completely happy
Yeah.
family life.
I think on the whole we really are. I mean, and I must say, Freeman is...
But most people think it's boring to talk about happy families. That's what we don't write about happy families.
That's
there are
true.
no great novels about happy families.
Yes, why not? Yes, and
It's
I think
boring
more...
you hearing talking
No.
about, oh, these wonderful kids.
More
and-
has to be written about happy families. Happy families are the most wonderful thing in the world, you know. I don't know. And
Yet, Freeman, can you imagine that if you hear people talk about their wonderful kids, about them hugging them, getting so much in return for everything you do, and Christmas, all the family is there, that is a kind of boredom. It's boring to talk about happy
Yes,
family
in
life.
fact, it's because we both agree that Christmas is a bore. And
Yeah.
because you do it so many
And
times.
happy family life in general.
That's right.
is-
No,
Yes,
Christmas,
I mean,
because the
it's-
Christmas
it's-
has become so much
But that's different.
it
It's two different things.
it's not, that's not family life. It's a charade, which we go through every year, and it is in a way overdone. I'd rather have a much simpler Christmas, but this is what they expected, and so it just has become
It's always done.
it's
Yeah.
become a routine. But the everyday family life means much more to me. Tolstoy famously remarked that all happy families are alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That's why great books are written about unhappy families. Unhappy families provide tension and drama, the stuff of literature, while happy families only provide a card game for children. It seems to be only in the visual arts that happy families are portrayed as central to the human condition. The Holy Family, centered on the child Jesus, has inspired thousands of great paintings and sculptures. One does not need to be a Christian to feel the joy of the Renaissance painters and the beauty of the masterpieces that they produced. Their religion taught them that this ordinary baby that they painted was the light of the world. Even for those of us to whom the religion is alien, the paintings and the light remain.
Did you have tragedies with the children? themselves. Or
Freeman's son George had a very hard time. You know, it wasn't very easy for him to grow up. In fact, it was very hard.
Yes.
And it was first of all a broken family. I mean, it was, you know, that he didn't have his mom here, but it was also, I think, the time of life. You know, the wars and so on, and he had a very hard time struggling with it all, and you know, and then there came the drugs on the scene, and you know, at that time, at the beginning, when the drug problem started, there wasn't an either or. You couldn't say no. Everybody took it. Everybody was in with it, and you know, you would be a complete outsider if you didn't. And I think children just were baffled and sort of got pulled into it, and you know, it's now that you so many years later find out what tragedies these drugs really bring, you know, it's more possible to teach children, you know.
yeah, but the moment you're talking about Freeman's son, Vietnam, drugs.
Yes.
Here the story becomes interesting.
Yes.
Yes, that's
he was
exactly
got-
the point. That was the closest we came to a tragedy.
Yes.
And it was, in fact, interesting. I mean, it is true that something would you could write a book about it.
Oh,
I remember
yes.
sitting here in this room, having a heart-to-heart talk with him, and he was telling me how wonderful these drugs are,
Yeah.
and how you're not really alive if you don't take them. And I couldn't convince him. I mean, you know, he was just absolutely sure he was right, and that I was just an old fuddy-duddy and I didn't understand. And that's the way it was. And you couldn't argue with him, and in the end the police picked him up and locked him up, and that was the best thing that ever happened to him, because
It was a rude awakening.
then he saw what it really meant, and he was in the juvenile jail with a lot of,
How old was he?
he was 14,
Uh-huh.
with a lot of other kids whom he realized immediately had absolutely zero chances, that these were uneducated kids who were never going to make it in life. And he immediately realized that's not what he wanted. And so it changed him around, and not immediately, but
Yeah.
we were very lucky
Yeah.
That he had a kind of opposite mirror of.
that he had this he was forced to face realities just because the police actually moved in, and
Otherwise, could have been
otherwise
wrong.
he
Yeah,
might
well,
have easily gone to the bad. I mean, it was a big chance anyway. I mean, it was 50-50 whether he would have gone to the bad or not. But in fact, he became then, at the age of 16, he was making a life for himself, building boats and
Mhm.
in love with nature. And he had the great good luck to become acquainted with David Brower, who was
Yeah.
the leader of the environmentalists. You know, he ran the Sierra Club at that time, and George sort of became a substitute son for him, and he became a substitute father for George in a way. And he lived in the Brower family for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the most important things. I
Yes.
think finding the right people, I think, is
And so he could.
outside of the family.
He had this enormous respect for David Brower, which was quite. I mean, David Brower is a great man, and he stood for everything that George believed in. And he wasn't his father, so it went very well.
Mhm.
And poor old David Brower had 3 sons, which he didn't get along with. And so George was the son he would have liked to have had.
But can you remember your son coming home, being sent to jail, drugs? What was your reaction? Because you had your ideas about George and his upbringing and what he should become. Now there's a son going to jail, 14 years old.
Yeah, we talked, of course, very, very heavily over this. I mean, it was a very hard choice. We had to make the choice whether to leave him in jail or to try to get him out and hire a lawyer and we decided quite together to let him sit there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded terribly cruel, and I think that's the one time we both shed tears. But
Yes, it was very, very hard,
but
it certainly was the right decision, as it turned out.
yeah,
To be kind, you have to be cruel.
Yes.
absolutely. It's just.
But that's the only case in the whole family of anything close to a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
God is indeed deep. Yes, God, the turtle is now speaking. God is indeed deep, she said to the fish in the sea. And much higher than high, she told the mountains. He is swift and free as the wind, and still and solid as a great rock, she said to the breezes and stones. She is the life of the world, Turtle said to the willow, always close by, yet beyond the farthest twinkling light, she told the ant and the star. God is gentle and powerful, above all things and within all things. God is all that we dream of and all that we seek, said old Turtle, all that we come from and all that we can find. God is. Old Turtle had never said so much before. All the beings of the world were surprised and became very quiet. But old Turtle had one more thing to say.
Freeman, the quote we're talking about. You can pick it up.
Oh, I'm sorry, which quote was that?
Yeah, you were. What were we talking about? Our short-term memories.
Yes, no, you were asking me.
What were we talking about? About God?
Yes, whether Weinberg said science would not give any consolation in facing death, and I said, yes, I agree with that. No, I think the main consolation one has to feel, I mean, everybody's scared of dying, everybody's scared of getting sick. There are all sorts of things which scare me to death. And consolation mostly just comes from companionship, that as soon as you somehow manage to stop thinking of yourself and think of a group of people and we're all in it together. That's the consolation. That's why I find family is of central importance. In some way, that dying is an important part of being a grandfather. I mean, that in some way it makes sense to die if you're a grandfather. It makes you less scared if you think of it that way. And that certainly has nothing to do with science and not much to do with religion.
Are you from time to time as afraid as Freeman sometimes is about dying?
No, I don't think I am. I always just felt, you know, it would be very selfish to think that I couldn't die because everybody else dies, and it's just, you know, one day it's my turn, and that's just it. I would feel very unhappy if I died at a time when my children still need me. I would like to die at a time when I feel I've done absolutely all they can, and they are now fine, and they are on their own, and now I'm not needed. And at that point, you know, I feel very privileged then to live a little bit longer, maybe, but I don't mind at that point, I think. But of course, you know, if I now were medically told that maybe I do have only a short time to live, I might feel very differently about it. Then I probably, you know, you hear that so often that suddenly when you're actually confronted with it, you do change your mind, and you know, you have to, of course. And I mean, there are stages of dying. People who take such a long time to die, they very often are totally resigned to this, and the case in point is Alice's friend, José.
Yes.
And José was suddenly turned with cancer, and at the beginning was perfectly resigned. She was an extremely pious person, and so she simply told everybody that she was going to heaven. She never said, I'm dying. She simply said, I'm going to heaven soon, you know. But as the disease advanced, she suddenly realized this is it, this is real. And she became very different and resented it. Why is it me, and why can't I live? I'm not old enough, and, you know, just the way people go through these stages. And then she became very demanding, something she had never been in her life at all. And finally, I guess, I don't know, she probably became very peaceful before she died. I didn't see her again.
Are you really reconciling with the fact that you, sooner or later now, will push the daisies?
Well, it depends, of course, what you mean by reconciled. I mean, of course, intellectually it's clear this is going to happen, but still one is scared, and that's part of being human, that we have this, as far as we know, unique ability to foresee our own deaths. And
Mm-hmm.
that's always been a big part of being human.
How frightening is it for you?
Well, quite frightening in times, but of course one doesn't think about it very often.
When you think about it?
I mean, at the moment it happens that the boy's other grandfather is dying of cancer, and that's of course something we think about quite a lot. And so it is somehow, that brings it close when somebody you know well is dying. And of course I reached the time of life when many of my friends start dying off. One of my closest friends died a few months ago. So it's part of living, there's no doubt about it. And
Yeah.
as you get older it gets more imminent. And
That's the fact.
yes, it's
That's
true.
the science part of it. But
Yes, and I think it makes it easier to be a grandfather simply because that is the expected role of a grandfather, that
you're gonna die.
you're going to die. Not that it won't take so terribly long. I mean, grandfathers don't hang around forever.
But you're rationalizing now, or as you
Yes, of
talk
course.
about your role as a grandfather.
Yes, and of course, in fact, I mean, if I wake up in the night and feel scared, you just have to live with that, and you just have to say to yourself, there's no point of living if you're only scared all the time. And
Wasting your time.
yes, you better while you're alive, you better just think about other things, and that's of course the way to deal with it.
Do you manage to get over it?
Yes.
Takes 5 minutes, an hour, 3 hours?
Well, it varies, of course, but I mean, generally not so long. I mean, it is for me. Well, maybe at the worst a day or two. And
A day or two.
yes,
Worrying about
worrying
the
about
fact that you're not going to escape.
yes, I mean,
Our
but
fate.
it's always associated with some particular malady. If I think I'm getting Alzheimer's, or I'm thinking I'm getting one or another kind of cancer or something, you know, that's what happens. Then after a while you come to your senses and you find out that after all you're quite healthy.
Mhm. But this idea that there was a universe of time before you, there will be a universe of time after you, and in between there was Freeman Dyson for a split second, and the world goes on without him. Whatever you do with your definition of time, Yeah.
Yes.
This is the frightening idea.
No, that's certainly not. No.
This
that,
is
to
the
me,
consoling idea.
That's consoling, yes. I mean, the fact that, after all, I'm part of a much bigger process, that I'm one of a great crowd of people who are really doing important things. To me, that's consoling, and I'm laying one brick in the cathedral, so to speak. And
Freeman said something about he was rationalizing that being a grandfather was reconciling him with his own dad. Grandfathers are dying, yeah?
Yeah.
They are supposed to be dying.
Yeah.
Do you have the same feeling that life is ending at the same time you become a grandmother?
I don't know. It certainly makes you very much aware of it when you become a grandmother. You know, that life will end. And yes, the more they grow, I guess I feel that way. Again, there's such a nice thing to know that they live on and that they are there, you know, and that they are part of you that stays behind and maybe feels and does what you had done.
Do you really mean that? Because I think that this stuff of, they go on and they're part of me, and so I'm consoled by the fact that there's continuation, and I will.
Oh, well,
is it really true, or is this a rationalization?
Well, probably rationalization, but I don't. It doesn't mean that I feel, well, all right, it's time for me to go, and I want to go. I certainly don't. I mean, you know, I'm much too curious. I always say to Freeman, well, it's really shucks. Now there are all these new things being invented and done, and there will be a time when I won't see what goes on. And in fact, after my father and my sister died, that's what I felt most strongly. I wanted to scream and let them know, you know, all these things have happened and you didn't see it, you know. I certainly, you know, in that way, I would certainly like to keep on living, for sure. And
but Old Turtle had one more thing to say. There will soon be a new family of beings in the world, she said, and they will be strange and wonderful. They will be reminders of all that God is. They will come in many colors and shapes. So there are the new creatures coming.
These are people.
Right.
is that what it is?
With different faces and different ways of speaking. Their thoughts will soar to the stars, but their feet will walk the earth. They will possess many powers. They will be strong yet tender, a message of love from God to the earth, and a prayer from the earth back to God. And the people came. Look there, look how many there are.
Look how colorful they are.
Hi there.
They learn to make such colorful clothes, do they?
But the people forgot. They forgot that they were a message of love and a prayer from the earth. And they began to argue about who knew God and who did not, and where God was and was not, and whether God was or was not. And often the people misused their powers and hurt one another or killed one another, and they hurt the earth, until finally even the forests began to die. That's what happened when they started to fight each other. And the rivers and the oceans and the plants and the animals and the earth itself, because the people could not remember who they were or where God was. Until one day there came a voice like the growling of thunder, but soft as butterfly sneezes. Please, stop. The voice seemed to come from the mountain who rumbled, sometimes I see God swimming in the dark blue depths of the sea, and from the ocean who sighed, He is often among the snow-capped peaks reflecting the sun. From the stone who said, I sometimes feel her breath as she blows by. And from the breeze who whispered, I feel his still presence as I dance among the rocks. And the star declared, God is very close. And the island added, His love touches everything. And after a long, lonesome and scary time, the people listened and began to hear and to see God in one another and in the beauty of all the earth. And old Turtle smiled.
Oh.
And so did God.
That's right.
It would be idiotic to think that the whole universe centers around this particular species. As we know, we're only one out of millions of species, and that there's no reason to believe we're the last word in any sense. And on the other hand, I mean, if you regard us as meaning living creatures with some kind of intelligence, then I would say, on the whole, I would say that it does look as though the universe had that in mind. I mean, that it should be hospitable to life and hospitable to intelligence. So it's just a question of what you mean. I think, I mean, you can say that the universe has some kind of a purpose to become aware of itself.
We are the vehicles to understand.
Well, no,
for the
we're not
universe
the.
to
We're not
understand.
the. We're just one of the possible attempts, and we're not the vehicle. We're probably one of many, and but the fact that the universe may be sort of in some way groping to become aware of itself, I find is quite likely to be true, and it's certainly an appealing idea. And there's nothing in the laws of science that contradicts that. That doesn't imply that the human beings have a special place. It implies that maybe we do have some responsibilities.
Here we are. I know what you're flying away, huh?
Yes, I mean that
Colonizing the universe.
yes, it may be in some sense that we are at a strategic place in the whole. It happens just for sort of accidental reasons. But if it wasn't us, it would probably be somebody else. And 20 years ago, I attempted to set down in words a vision of beauty and consolation that came to me in a dream. The dream came in the night of July the 6th, 1977. I wrote first an unedited version of the dream as I remembered it. Then I wrote an edited version, which was published in the concluding chapter of my book, Disturbing the Universe. For artistic reasons, I decided to give the book a quiet ending. I did not wish the book to end with a shout of joy. The architecture of the book required that it end with a nocturne rather than a capriccio, so the edited version of the dream was muted. Here is the unedited version, written down while memory was fresh. I have been complaining for years to lower-level officials, and there's never been any response. "Why don't you go straight to the top?" says my wife. "If I were you, I would just telephone the head office." So I pick up the phone and dial the number. Everybody in our family knows that I'm a coward on the telephone. Usually I make all kinds of excuses to avoid making a call, especially when it's to somebody I don't know. But this time is different. I take the plunge without hesitation. To my amazement, the secretary answers at once in a friendly voice and asks what I want. I say I'd like an appointment. She says, "Good, I put you down for Friday at 5. I say, "May I bring the children?" She says, "Of course." As I put down the phone, I realize that today is Friday and we have only a few hours to get ourselves ready. I ask the children if they want to come. I tell them that we're going to talk to God and they'd better behave themselves. Only Emily and Rebecca are interested. In a way, I'm glad not to have the whole crowd on my hands. So we say goodbye to the others quickly before they have time to change their minds. It's just Emily and Rebecca and me. We slip out of the house quietly and walk across town to the office. The office is a large building, rather like a church, but without any roof. Looking upward, we see the building goes up and up like an elevator shaft forever. We hold hands and jump off the ground and go zooming up the shaft. I look at my watch. I see we have only a few minutes until 5 o'clock. Luckily, we're zooming up very fast, and it looks as if we shall be on time. Just as my watch says 5, we arrive at the top of the shaft and walk out into an enormous throne room. The room has whitewashed walls and heavy oak beams. At the side facing us is the throne, a huge, dark wooden affair with wicker back and sides. I walk slowly toward the throne. The two girls follow behind, a little nervously. The throne is at the top of a flight of steps. From below it looks empty. I look at my watch again. Probably God didn't expect us to be so punctual. Anyway, we can wait here till he comes. After a few more minutes, I decide to climb the steps and have a closer look at the throne. The girls are shy and stay at the bottom. I walk up, and when I get to the top step, my eyes are level with the seat. I see then that the throne is not empty after all. There is a baby looking as if he's about 3 months old, lying there on the seat and smiling at me. I pick him up and show him to the girls. They run up the steps and take turns with me carrying him in their arms. I lift him up to my face and kiss his mouth. A flood of overwhelming peace and joy pours into me. I hold him for a few minutes longer, knowing that the questions I had intended to raise with him have been answered. Then I put him gently back on his throne and say goodbye. The girls hold my hands again, and we walk down the steps together.
The image of God as a 3-month-old, for you, is the ultimate expression of beauty and consolation.
In a way, yes. I mean, that I think is true, that it's not only just a beautiful picture, but it also may be something real, that God is young. The universe is young, and
We have to help him.
yes, that everything is just at the beginning.
He doesn't know what he started.
Exactly. He doesn't know any more than we do. And that, I think, has some meaning, quite apart from the beauty of it. There's a man called John Horgan who just has written a famous book called The End of Science, which created a great stir. And my son remarked when somebody asked him about this book, and he says, my son said, how can he know so much about the end of science when we're so close to the beginning? And that's the way I feel also about life in general.
We know so little.
Yes, we're just at the beginning, and that applies to everything we do, and even to God.